Good afternoon, Mr. Prime Minister. We heard earlier this month from Kapana Nagendra, spokesperson of Tamil rights group, that it is imperative that Canada takes decisive actions to hold the Sri Lankan government accountable as a root cause of transnational repression. Specifically, Ms. Nagendra stated that the Sri Lankan government's ongoing interference in the lives of Tamil Canadians will only cease once they are held fully accountable, since as long as they continue to operate with impunity, feeling shielded from repercussions for their war crimes and human rights violations, they will persist in using intimidation tactics against Tamil activists in Canada. Do you agree with this view?
I'm sorry, I need to know more of the context. I certainly agree that like many diaspora communities, Tamil Canadians are exposed to actions by the government of Sri Lanka that we need to do everything we can to protect them from.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Prime Minister, under your leadership, there have been commendable efforts to resettle vulnerable populations in response to global conflicts. There's the Afghan Refugee Resettlement Initiative, there's another special stream for Ukrainians, and of course M62 passed recently, which creates one for Uyghurs. However, as far as I know, there has never been a special refugee stream created in response to a crisis in Africa. There's family reunification available now for refugees from Sudan, which of course is different from a special stream. Meanwhile, Tigrayans are in danger in the region, and there has been highly disturbing evidence of Eritrean forces in Tigray forcibly deporting Eritreans in Tigray back to Eritrea. Diaspora groups representing these communities have expressed concern that there has been no special stream created in response to these crises. Do you share these concerns?
I am, of course, very concerned with the situation in Sudan and in the region. Canada's response to various challenges around the world, beginning with the special stream, although we didn't call it that way, for Syrian refugees, has continued to happen on a case-by-case basis. They're all slightly different in terms of cases. What we have done in terms of the family reunification around Sudan is significant, and we're always looking for ways to do more.
Would you oppose the creation of special streams for Tigrayans and Eritreans to come to Canada?
That is not a proposal before cabinet or before in discussions right now. But as we look at how Canada can best help in Africa and elsewhere, I'm sure there will be different things looked at.
Okay. Another recommendation that diaspora groups have repeatedly made is that Canada should avoid cooperating with authoritarian regimes on criminal matters. The rationale behind the suggestion is fairly simple. Because authoritarian regimes do not operate under the rule of law, Canada should not assist these regimes in removing individuals from Canada whom they accuse of committing crimes. Do you disagree?
Canada has a very strong policy around extraditions, around deportations, and we make evaluations on a country-by-country and indeed case-by-case basis.
There is at present a treaty between Canada and China on mutual legal assistance in criminal matters. Would you object to this treaty being terminated?
I think it is certainly a question that we have reflected on over the past years with China. It is important to try and have a complete approach. There are initiatives, an example of that is the Montreal Kunming Convention of the Parties 15 on biodiversity in Montreal a couple of years ago, where working with China on protecting biodiversity and nature actually resulted in a landmark agreement around the world of where China successfully brought in many countries of the global south to protect nature, that demonstrated there are areas in which we can work alongside China for the benefit of Canadians and others. There are other situations in which we're competing and competing with China on economics, whether it's the significant trade relations with China or economic opportunities that we are pursuing, but also very conscious of the risks on, but there are areas in which we are directly challenging China, whether it's on democracy in Hong Kong or the safety of the Uyghurs or many other issues. And as we move forward in this relationship where we are very clear-eyed about what China is, we make determinations about how to use various instruments at our disposal.
Sure, and I appreciate all of that, but I am asking specifically on cooperation in criminal matters. Would you agree that it isn't appropriate at this stage for Canada and China to be cooperating in criminal matters?
I would contend that regardless of what an agreement might say, the actual cooperation right now is very carefully looked at if any of it exists at all. And that is always top of mind as we work together or as we look to whether or not we work together. We look at the whole context of it.
All right. We have primarily dealt in these hearings with regimes considered to be the major players, China, Russia, Iran, India. But of course, there are smaller dictatorships in the world that collaborate with these bigger players. And I raised an example of this in my cross-examination of Mr. Shortliff vis-a-vis Cuban state broadcasters replaying Russia Today programming in Canada. And indeed, Cuban human rights activists have flagged that Canada must address Cuban collaboration with the likes of China and Russia in order to comprehensively address the threats posed by those countries. Would you disagree with that assertion?
I think how we deal with every and any country in the world needs to be very alert to the context, alert to the potential pitfalls or dangers, but also the potential benefits to Canadians, and having a nuanced foreign policy that recognizes both challenges and dangers and opportunities is the hard work that the government does on an ongoing basis.
I understand that the Canadian government engages in dialogue with Cuban government actors. Another point that Cuban human rights activists have repeatedly made is that the Canadian government should also be meeting with pro-democracy groups in Cuba. Would you agree with that?
I can say from personal experience that I know we do engage and have engaged with pro-democracy groups all around the world.
Does that include in Cuba?
I believe so, but I would have to know. I'm not apprised on it in its latest forms, whether that's ongoing right now or not.
Okay, and if Canada does not engage with pro-democracy groups in Cuba, would you agree that Canada should?
It is part of the responsibility of every Canadian mission overseas to engage with civil society organizations and various actors, not just governments of any given country. So I am actually quite certain that Canada does engage with a range of civil society actors in Cuba, like everywhere else.
Okay, and not to hammer the point, but just I want to make sure I get this right. If it is the case that the embassy does not, do you agree that it should?
I have just stated that I believe that it is important for every mission around the world to engage with civil society in the country in which it's in a way that is appropriate for that context.
Okay, thank you. I have no further questions.
Thank you. Mr. Doody for the Ukrainian-Canadian Congress.
Good afternoon, Prime Minister. I'd like to talk about expelling diplomats from Canada. Last week, on October 8th, the director of MI5, Ken McCallum, gave a speech in which he stated that, quote, over 750 Russian diplomats have been expelled from Europe since Putin invaded Ukraine in 2022, the great majority of them spies. This goes well beyond all historical precedent and has put a big dent in Russian intelligence services' ability to cause damage in the West. With allies, we're keeping up that pressure, but not by denying diplomatic visa applications from Russian spies. It's not flashy, but it works. Kick them out, keep them out. Canada has not expelled a Russian diplomat since March of 2018, when 7 Russian diplomats were expelled in solidarity with the United Kingdom in response to a nerve agent attack. Today, Russia has 69 diplomats in Canada. By comparison, the UK has 53 and Germany has 50. Why does the Canadian government permit Russia, a hostile foreign state, to not only have diplomats in Canada, but such a large number of them, exceeding the number of some of our closest allies?
I don't have the numbers that you have, so I'm not going to repeat them. But I do know that a big part of diplomacy is ensuring that we both have an opportunity to talk with adversary countries at home, but that we also have presence on the ground in Moscow and in Russia writ large. I know for a fact that Canada's diplomatic presence in Russia is reaching a point at which, should it decrease much further, would be difficult to sustain at all. And I believe that there is value in continuing to have Canadians in Russia as it continues to be such a bad actor on the world stage.